Okay, so what up, friendos, and welcome, fellow gamers. You know, if you were to ask me, right, Kira, is it good to have more video games to play, devoid of any other context? I'd be like, yeah, of course. You know, what a silly question. But if you were to ask a console fanboy, which, yes, still exists somehow in 2025, you probably wouldn't be able to decipher the level of stupidity and screeching. The days of console-specific exclusives are getting shorter, the horizon is brighter, and this is overwhelmingly good news for gamers everywhere, no matter how you choose to play. And yet, somehow, these 2008 permanently stuck in their Transformers Jim Jam console fanboys somehow are against this change. So now you're about to witness the 5 stages of grief for console fanboys in real time, and frankly, it's fucking hilarious.
This was met with an incredible amount of backlash. People saying they're going to boycott the PlayStation 6. I've seen, personally, I've seen hundreds of posts of people saying they're selling their PlayStation 5 and jumping to PC.
The PlayStation we know and love is dead. It's dead, and you killed it, bruv. You did.
This will destroy the PlayStation ecosystem. The money they make by keeping players in their system will far outweigh the 3 copies they sell to the family that still uses an Xbox. They love destroying their own brand. It's insane. If they do this, why would I buy a PS6? Now, if you would have told me 10 years ago that Xbox games were on PC and PlayStation, and the PlayStation games are on PC and Xbox, I'd have asked you where you were getting that crack cocaine you were smoking, but that's the reality that we're living in, and this is an overwhelmingly positive change for gamers everywhere. More games to play, more freedom to choose how, when, and where to play them, but obviously not everyone feels this way. People are raging at each piece of news as they watch their beloved corporate overlord make the correct and smart business decisions. But what about my console? You know, what about my console's brand value? Why won't you love me, Sony? I wrote you, you still ain't wrote back. So the first piece of news that landed was around July 26, 2025, or at least the first piece of news this time, because we tend to have this conversation at least once a year as new things happen. This was a simple job posting for Sony Interactive Entertainment. Nothing major to see here, right? They're just hiring people. But it's a senior director role for multi-platform and account management, responsible for leading strategy for, quote, PlayStation Studio software titles across all digital platforms beyond PlayStation hardware, including Steam, Epic Games Store, Xbox, Nintendo, and mobile. This role focuses on, quote, multi-platform strategy leadership and executing cohesive launch plans and lifecycle strategies for multi-platform titles. So Sony, in their own words, is hiring senior management to help them launch games multi-platform. And this, as it always does, triggered the 5 stages of grief for the console fanboys. Every time a piece of news pops up, they go through it all over again. PlayStation fans, of course, reacted to this news in a super reasonable way. That is to say, they started emailing Sony business email accounts trying to get them to leak their entire corporate strategy. I assume the response that they were looking for was, don't worry, Stan, you know, head pat, we'll do only what you want us to do forever because you like exclusivity for some reason. Instead, the Sony response is exactly what you'd expect. It sounds like a perfectly written PR statement saying, we're going to do whatever we want, whatever we feel will grow PlayStation as a gaming business. But here's another head pat for being a, quote, valued player. So what you're about to see is people being completely in denial that this means anything or that history means anything, because that's just what they do. Here's a fanboy stating, quote, you will only get live service games Lamau, ignoring that the entire industry has changed in the last 5 years and only getting live service games now is just another step in the direction of only getting single player games a few years in the future. And obviously, don't get me wrong, this job listing is not the smoking gun. It doesn't state every first-party game from PlayStation that was previously exclusive is going to be on every platform, including Xbox, or that this will happen immediately if it were to be the case. The single-player tentpole games that traditionally sell the PlayStation console are likely going to continue being PlayStation first, PC slightly later, although this window is going to shrink and they are going to increase in speed in releases on PC as the multi-platform strategy evolves. This likely applies, at least for now, and that's the operative words of this sentence, for now, This likely applies to launching live service games, right? They might be day one on everything going forward, or they might be shorter time before they come to Xbox if they do well. But the writing is on the wall for exclusivity, and while Sony fans might be deep in the hole, either denying that this listing means anything, threatening to sell their console, or screaming about how Sony's a terrible company that only makes the wrong decisions, that doesn't change any of this. Regardless, this news is just a reminder that times are changing. If you think this isn't a step in the direction of death to exclusivity, you are in fact in denial, because we can look at the evidence here. So first we have the whole console war era, which is like 30 years, 40 years of consoles having their own exclusive titles and going nowhere else. Obviously, PlayStation exclusives were PlayStation exclusive, Xbox was Xbox, and that's just how it was. Sony fans at that time, the same as Xbox before them, said these games would never, ever, ever be on any other platform. And then we see the first release of these exclusive games, first Xbox exclusive games going on PC. Nobody believed this was going to be the case, and yet it was. It made much more sense that way because Xbox is owned by Microsoft, Microsoft owns Windows, and Windows is the largest platform on the planet. But then Sony started releasing games from PlayStation that were previously exclusives and their major tentpole single-player console-selling games on PC, which is a massive shift from the norm. And as you can guess, Sony fans took this incredibly well. From 2020 onwards, we can describe this period of time as the post-multi-platform PlayStation era. No longer are their games considered to be exclusives. They are time-limited exclusives now. And you know what people said? Well, first there was the extreme anger. I suppose only on PlayStation is pretty worthless now. What a disgrace. Other people being able to play the video games that we enjoy, what a disgrace, guys. Absolutely fucking reprehensible behavior. Won't you think of the children? Many such comments exist, this exact same narrative. It's bad if other people get to play the things I enjoy. After going through the denial stage of, oh, this is definitely never going to happen, to the anger of, oh, it's happening, fuck Sony, they're terrible, blah, blah, blah. They don't deserve our games. They don't deserve our business. We then moved past bargaining and straight into threatening. There are thousands of comments online that you'll find from the 2020 era of people basically saying, if Sony goes multi-platform, we'll sell our console, we'll stop being fans. And again, remember, this was 2020. These people still own the consoles, they still play the games. It was, of course, just posturing the whole time, trying to, dictate some kind of power over a multinational corporation who obviously doesn't give a fuck so long as you keep giving them your money, which they continue to do. After this, they started to accept the loss of exclusivity, but believed somehow this would be limited. Sony would limit these releases, it would only be these initial games, then it was only going to be the initial games going to PC 2 or 3 years after release. Which brings us straight back to denial. Oh, it's not going to happen quick. They're going to get them after we're done with them. They're secondhand. They're sloppy. Who cares? But in 2022, PlayStation studio head Herman Hulst was asked about the launch window for PlayStation exclusives going to PC, and he said, quote, I think going forward, we'll see at least a year between releases on PlayStation and on the PC platform. Remember, 3 years prior to this guy making this quote, in 2019, it was thought that it was impossible for games to go to PC. Then it was, oh, it will be 3 years. Then it's 1 year. And then, of course, the goalposts and company messaging moved forward again. As of 2024, during a shareholder Q&A call, company president Hiroki Totoki said they're going to go, quote, aggressive on improving our margin performance with multi-platform games playing a significant role. He specifically referred to their initial business goal of making the PlayStation console popular, but that they need to have strong first-party content, not just on the PlayStation console, but also multi-platform. He specifically states that this is financially beneficial to release faster on multiple platforms. But here's the kicker, right? And this is where the Sony fans started punching the air in their Transformer Jim Jams. He said, by multi-platform, I mean PlayStation and PC, not Xbox and Switch. So this is where they all thought, oh, games are never going to go to Xbox, right? It's been decades at this point. Games are never going to go to Xbox. Which brings us to this thread that you see on screen from 2024, where fanboys are all high-fiving each other with sweaty palms, taking a victory lap over a petition to bring Helldivers 2 to the Xbox console. Quote, well, that puts an end to the hashtag Sony2 narrative. that we will be seeing PlayStation games on rival platforms like Xbox and Switch. It makes this petition look silly in hindsight. There was never a chance. And oh wow, the end of that quote couldn't have aged better, could it? It makes this petition look silly in hindsight. There was never a chance. Cue the Benny Hill theme music and the news that Helldivers 2, a PlayStation exclusive, oh wait, a PC and PlayStation multi-platform game, is coming to Xbox. For the first time in history, a PlayStation published first-party game is going to the rival console. Some people say this has happened before with the MLB game, but that is not a game where the IP is wholly owned by PlayStation and it's being published by somebody else, not PlayStation specifically. Helldivers 2 is the first time this has ever happened, and it's following on from 6-8 months ago where people would have said this was physically impossible, it would never happen. And you've got company executives saying Xbox is not in the plans for our multi-platform expansion. As you would expect, Sony fanboys lost their shit over this development. This is beyond embarrassing. So you still believe in the clowns running the PlayStation brand? And the funny thing is that you see every one of these threads is full of people stating Xbox is dead, ignoring the fact that just weeks after this announcement, Xbox released their financials and Game Pass earned $5 billion in revenue yearly. Their overall gaming revenue is up 10%. The service revenue is up 13%, despite selling 22% less consoles. And with all this being said, let's not miss the forest for the trees here. There's a lot of that will never happen going on over the last 5 years. PlayStation games will always be exclusive to PlayStation. Oh wait, they're not. PlayStation games will never launch in less than 3 years on another platform. Oh wait, they did. PlayStation games will never launch day and date with other platforms. Oh wait, they did. Oh, but that will only be live service. We'll see. PlayStation games will never go to Xbox. Oh wait, they just did. But that will only be one live service game, surely. The goalposts move every time to the point where we're not even playing the same game anymore. And now the fanboy narrative is that it doesn't even matter because other platforms get the game so late that it's worthless. Like this guy who characterizes it as years later sloppy seconds, raising the question, why do you even care? If releasing games on a platform nobody plays is irrelevant, why do you care if they do it? Why do you care if it happens day one? And realistically, why do you care anyway? You're still getting the games. You still prefer to play on PlayStation. They're also, of course, not at all overreacting to a company making a business decision that will most likely make them more money in the long run, which presumably would allow them to release more video games for you to play. As this thread states, we are watching the fall of PlayStation in real time. Meanwhile, all financial lines go up. PlayStation revenue, Sony revenue is up year on year. All of this, of course, leads me to one of the most amazing takes I've ever seen on social media. I don't know why everyone is celebrating this stuff when it'll ultimately lead everyone to buying a PC or a handheld device in the end, which would limit consumer choice in the market. So they've cracked the code on this one, really, haven't they? More choice of where you buy or play a thing is limiting the market, but things being available only on one thing is not limiting the market. Amazing. After all this news, you have certain YouTube channels just missing the forest for the trees completely. I personally love this interaction where a user comments, "Every game everywhere is the future of gaming." The response from the channel owner is to say, "No, it isn't. That's just a Microsoft talking point. The industry loser claiming where things will go is rich." Which again is funny considering Microsoft just posted their financials. And if you look at the last 10 years of Microsoft financials, they've almost doubled their gaming sector revenue from like 10 billion to 23 billion. And most of that growth has come in the last 4 years, where they've changed their strategy from trying to sell consoles to trying to sell video games. Not just that, but there's an almost immediate response asking the channel owner to at least admit it would be good for consumers due to the choice. The choice, do I play on this console? Do I play on PC? Do I play on that console? And of course, crickets, no response, because these people don't care about pro consumer. They care about pro PlayStation, or at least they think that they do. Because if they really cared about pro PlayStation, they'd care about the company evolving with the times, making more money, and therefore giving them more video games to play. Because realistically, video games are only getting more expensive to make on the AAA end. If they can make more money from them, presumably they can support these games further. And videos, comments like this make sense for me to highlight because it's going to be really funny to come back and look at them in 12, 24 months and see how badly they've aged. Realistically, let's look at all of this from the simplest perspective possible. And, I might be wrong on this, but let's see how I see it. Sony is a publicly traded company. They're a multinational mass media business. They are not in any way a console business. Even PlayStation, which is their gaming brand, isn't a console business. It's a gaming business. They exist to make money for Sony by selling things using the brand of PlayStation. Just like Xbox was never a console business, it's a gaming business. They realized they could make more money selling video games in a subscription service than they could by focusing exclusively on consoles. When Xbox focused purely on consoles, Xbox was generating around $10 billion a year in revenue, and then 10 years later, with Game Pass day one releases, they're generating $23 billion in revenue for the year. And that's with their console sales being down massively. Sell less consoles, make more money, line goes up, business success. If you look at Xbox or PlayStation as a console manufacturer exclusively and measure their success on how many consoles they sell, instead of, as a gaming business, how much money they make, you're using the wrong metrics. I mean, what even is a console in the first place? It's a platform to sell games, a way to lock people into the ecosystem so that they spend money. During the physical era, this made total sense to focus on exclusives because it was harder to make money elsewhere. During the digital era, where people are playing on different hardware, where the rise of mobile, cloud gaming, third-party hardware manufacturers, an exclusive console focus makes much less sense. And obviously you can make tons of money doing this. I mean, look at Nintendo. This is exclusively what they do. They focus exactly on maintaining their same audience. But is your audience going to grow at the same rate of the entire industry if everybody has access to your products? Common sense states no, because if you can play something everywhere, obviously that's opening yourself up to a lot more players, a lot more consumers, a lot more people that are going to buy the things than if they have to buy your console, which might not have other games that they want to play year round. And to be honest, the fear mongering that gamers will suddenly up and quit using a PlayStation if the games are available elsewhere is not only dismissed by Sony's analysts with an official statement in November of 2024 stating, "We did not confirm any such trend at this time, nor do we see it as a major risk," means that this is exactly what it is, fear-mongering, and it's also proven untrue from history. We've already seen a similar concept play out in a smaller way with the big AAA publishers in gaming trying to make their own storefronts and launchers on PC. They used the exact same tools of the console war era to try this. Exclusive games. They stopped releasing their games on platforms like Steam, and they said, if you want our games, you'll have to come to our launcher to buy them. This didn't require a whole bunch of upfront money, it didn't require you to buy a console, it didn't require you to put up any money up front. This was a free download of a launcher. And then they even discounted the games if you bought them through their own launcher, because Steam, of course, takes a 30% cut. So they could sell them at a discount and still make more money than selling on Steam. But people refused to move. Steam users largely refused to go and use these launchers. And after a couple of years, every single one of these publishers started releasing their games on Steam again. The idea that users will simply stop engaging with the product they've used for over a decade, having a library of games built up and brand trust or recognition, is just incorrect. And that doesn't even speak on the fact that console players play consoles. They don't want to play PC, regardless of what it is, the space that they take to set up, some idea that they're really difficult to use, or there's going to be driver issues and conflicts and things, difficulty to maintain, software conflicts, whatever the reason is, console players primarily play consoles. They're not going to swap just because games are available somewhere where they had no interest in playing anyway. Especially because if you just look at the last 5 years, from 2020 to 2025, this shows us waiting a year or two for these exclusive games to come to PC means that they're not exclusive anyway. So if it was the case that somebody was going to swap from PlayStation to PC just because there was no exclusives, they'd already have done it, right? Because if everyone decided what platform to game on based on how many games are on that platform, every single person will be a PC gamer because they just have the most games, factually. PC drinks everybody's milkshake. It's seen as the neutral third party in this console war that only really exists in the brains of the fanboys now, because Xbox stopped playing a long time ago when everything went to PC, and they stopped caring massively about console sales, especially because moving forward, the Xbox console is just going to be a Windows machine that can play everything, which means they're going to be able to play PlayStation games anyway, because PlayStation games are going to be on Steam faster and faster. If it was simply the case that the console market would shrink if games were on PC, it would already have happened, and yet console market is still growing faster than PC market despite massive growth for both. What we're seeing right now is an evolution of the games industry. We're seeing Microsoft selling their games everywhere, every storefront, every console, and of course pushing Game Pass as being the place to be, right? The cheapest place for consumers to go and play games. Whether you think this is good or bad, this is just what's happening. And this model is earning them vastly more money than ever before. Looking at the PlayStation's current top grossing chart, if you look at it now, it's something like 6 or 7 of the top 10 are owned by Microsoft. Pretty easy to look this up. Industry standard rates means that whenever Microsoft sells a game or a microtransaction inside that game on someone else's store, that store gets 30% and Microsoft gets 70%. This is true across the board. Steam, Xbox Store, PlayStation Store, it's all 30% to engage with the storefront. So if you think PlayStation, Sony aren't sitting there looking at Microsoft drink their milkshake with 6 of the top 7 games on the storefront and wondering, why aren't we doing the same? Why aren't our games on PC and Microsoft making us that 70% as well? You're just asleep at the wheel. They're absolutely looking at this as a possibility. And if you think times haven't changed and Sony aren't changing with those times, look no further than what I talked about earlier. November 2024, we're not looking at Xbox being part of our multi-platform strategy. And yet, less than a year later, July 2025, we have a PlayStation first-party exclusive, but obviously on PC, going to Xbox. Thanks, Kat. Yeah, just walk over my keyboard and pause my recording. Nice one. If you look at this, it's very simple math, right? Sony gets 100% of all first-party game sales on their own store, and of course the PlayStation platform, but they get 0% of all sales they don't make on every other platform. But as they've seen with selling their games on Steam already, which are going to sell less because they're years old at that stage and usually have issues because the ports aren't amazing, they still think that this is worth it enough to repeatedly say that this is part of their strategy going forward. They've recognized they make more money releasing games multi-platform. Of course, that mostly meaning PC, but with evidence of Helldivers 2 also now meaning Xbox and also Switch. And I'm going to say something right now that people are going to think I'm stupid. They usually do anyway, but you know, no company has ever cared about console sales. They just don't, because early in the life cycle of a console, they don't make a ton of money or they make a loss. They're loss leaders. And then later in the life cycle, they make a tiny amount of profit per piece of hardware sold. What they care about is that that console sale will lead the horse to water, the horse being the customer and the water being a digital storefront. If they can make more revenue selling their games on other storefronts and platforms and it's long-term sustainable, there is literally no reason to care about console sales theoretically dropping slightly, which again is unproven as a concept. There is no evidence that if Sony started selling their games on other consoles or other platforms, that it would hurt sales, from Sony's own mouth, as I talked about earlier, and also from 5 years of them having done so. So when we talk about this, there's 2 options in my mind. And, you know, this is option 1, the one that Sony fanboys will love the most. Sony doubles down on their, quote, brand value, which fans see as being tied directly or almost exclusively to first-party exclusive titles. They go the way of Nintendo, and they just immediately stop their slow march towards faster PC releases that they've said they're going to be more aggressive with. They stop day one live service multi-platform launches. They stop the new concept of releasing on Xbox. This all gets rolled back and they become Nintendo. They value their game brands being exclusive to PlayStation only, and they exist just like this. They will no doubt still be profitable, even more so with Microsoft giving them free money from all the games they're going to push to the PlayStation Store. This is a totally viable option, one that would keep the tiny vocal minority happy. But option 2 is the most likely in my opinion. They continue the path that the fanboys have been denying for 5 years, and the time between exclusivity shortens for PC, possibly even down to day one launches. They see the revenue numbers from live service games like Helldivers 2 going to Xbox, and they dip their toes into day one live service launches across all relevant platforms. And then if the financials make sense, this becomes the norm. The next step after that would be first-party single-player games going to Xbox after 1 to 3 years delay, just like they did with PC when it was thought impossible. And the obvious next step after that is catalog-wide multi-platform releases for all games as a matter of policy. That last one is a little bit less likely, but I still think long run is likely to happen. They're already beyond the stage of testing out multi-platform because they're balls deep in the PC market as a third-party publisher, and they are now a third-party publisher on Xbox as well. If the money makes sense, of course, they're going to do this. If they don't see a dramatic drop in console sales as a result of testing this, the question becomes really simple. Basic math, which option makes us the most money? Realistically, the most engaged fans, the ones screeching on social media, are never going to stop buying the product because it's more of a lifestyle and a personality to them than it is just a piece of gaming hardware. And realistically, most people treat gaming the same way they treat any other consumer activity. Most consumers just do what makes the most sense at the time. Does this have better value? Am I enjoying this? Is this the better experience? And the end of exclusivity is good for that, but it's not going to change people who enjoy PlayStation buying PlayStation because they're still getting the games. In fact, they're getting even more of them. If you think times don't change and Sony aren't going to have to update their model of how they engage with the market and the business of selling video games or being a brand in video games due to what Xbox is doing, I don't really know what to say to you. It's very clear right now that no matter what Sony decides to do, PlayStation games are going to be playable on the next Xbox, not just because they've started already publishing them on Xbox, but because the next Xbox machine will likely have access to Steam, and if it has access to Steam and PlayStation are releasing games on Steam faster, they're going to be able to play them anyway. Limiting the amount of sales exposure that they have is just silly at that stage. So you might not agree with me or with my analysis of the whole topic or my understanding of the games industry. Fair enough, it is what it is, just a man on YouTube talking shit. But each and every game that is tied to a single platform previously and is now not is a massive W for gamers everywhere. If you think the end of exclusivity is bad, you are undoubtedly more engaged and more concerned with your lack of personality requiring you to be overly attached to a brand and not concerned enough with just having more cool video games to play at a competitive price on any device that you want, which in my mind is the only thing you should really be concerned with as a gamer, not, where the corporate senpai overlord notices you, ooh, or which corporate logo is on the plastic box of PC components that you choose to spend your money on. Either way, I look forward to more screeching of Fanboys with each passing month when more and more exclusive titles are revealed elsewhere for the rest of us to enjoy, with increasing frequency and speed. At first, it was that will never happen. Then it was it will happen slowly. Then it was it won't happen for Xbox. And now it won't happen any faster or with single-player games. The goalposts continue to move. We're not playing the same game anymore. The writing's on the wall. In the short term, it's going to be a continued relaxation of exclusivity. The medium term is no exclusivity. And the long term is, in my mind, most likely hardware that can play any title on any storefront, but with specialized accessories, rewards, and incentives to buy and play on the branded version storefront. Everyone will drink everyone's milkshake, everyone will charge each other 30% for every sale on their store, and gamers will have access to more games than ever. A win for everybody. But until that day comes, I look forward to seeing videos and social media posts of people watching the tide get closer to the shore and trying to shout at the ocean that at first, it isn't happening, and second, if it doesn't stop happening, they're going to leave the beach and go to another one instead. Either way, thanks for watching. See you on the next one. Peace.